Look at these pictures. This is someone's brother, someone's sister, someone's friend, someone's loved one. And yet our government thinks of these people as criminals instead of who they actually are. Sick people in need of support to help them recover. Around Africa, scenes of drug addicts high out of their minds and passed out on the streets have become so too often. And our governments, fueled by the mentality of criminalization of anything to do with drugs, has for a long time penalized such individuals with incarceration, extrajudicial killings, and a complete overreaction to the situation and the problems that they are facing. I am going to say something very controversial that I found out recently. I would like to congratulate drugs for winning the war on drugs. This is the African Scientist, and today we are going to talk about the difficult problem of drug trafficking and drug abuse around the continent of Africa.
In our pursuit to create a drug-free society, things went horribly wrong. We were wrong because we thought prohibition, repression, and prison would protect our children. We allowed harsh penalties for drug-related offenses, including non-violent ones. We legitimized state forces when they arrested and punished many citizens, even when, in retrospect, that was excessive. It didn't work. It didn't work because the prohibition that global superpowers imposed to the world at the end of the World War II was a continuation of their political concerns and cultural preferences. It was not a rational and concrete strategy to cope with addiction.
For many years, the Imperial West has spread the information of fighting the war on drugs all around the world, influencing policies in many developing countries. Sadly, Africa has been caught up in these crosshairs, especially in the recent years. Because of its geographical location and the presence of many young people around Africa, along with laxed borders and corruption along the African shorelines, the African continent has emerged in the recent years as one of the best transit ports for drugs from all around the world. This map here shows that drugs that come from the Middle East, Europe, South America, and even as far off as North America and China all pass through the continent, especially the coastal ports around the coasts of Africa. This perhaps brings into focus the huge problem of the drug burden that is now found in most coastal nations around Africa. Indeed, heroin and many other opiates and psychoactive drugs have found their way in many African countries, especially those around the East African coast like Kenya, Mauritius, Seychelles, and Tanzania. Cocaine, on the other hand, a drug that most of the time originates from South America, has now found widespread use, especially on the western coast of Africa, in countries like Nigeria, Ghana, Egypt, and even South Africa. The drug laws around Africa are mostly inherited, like many of our laws, from our colonial past,
or forced upon us by the Imperial West, that is, the United States, of course.
And therefore, Africa has not actually had independence in coming up with drug policies that are best designed to handle the unique problems that face the young and emerging African population.
Still today, alcohol and tobacco are sold, freely consumed, and pushed by sophisticated marketing. And few people challenge this, although those substances are harmful to people's health. The somewhat artificial distinction between those substances and illegal drugs, such as cannabis, led many countries around the world, including many countries in Africa, to many mistakes. Those young people that were thrown in prison, did we convince them to take a better path? More often than not, the main thing they learned in prison is the craft of crime. Those that were left without treatment or died of overdose, who were they? They were our relatives. They were our children. Our society invested much of our scarce money and energy in repressive responses in pursuit of the illusion of a drug-free society. We need to wake up and abolish this illusion. As of today, we can honestly say that we regret not having questioned the certainties around drug control. We regret even more that these mistakes are being repeated time and time again, sometimes in good faith, sometimes simply to extract political dividends out of the misery of people who choose to use drugs. This has to stop. Production, trafficking, and consumption of illegal substances are on the rise. Criminalization constantly increases the power of criminal organizations by giving them a stronger grip on those whose livelihoods depend on these substances. Demand is here, it is sustainable, and supply will naturally follow.
Perhaps something we're very familiar with, alcohol, has had huge implications around Africa, causing the loss of countless lives.
Research has shown that more than 65% of all the deaths that occur on South African roads are caused by drunk driving, with the post-mortem results showing that 50% of the people who perished in road accidents having a blood alcohol level above the legal limit of 0.5 grams per 100 ml. The only achievement of the decades-long war on drugs is to criminalize addiction. In Africa, prohibition also impacts people who did not use drugs and don't even intend to. People who are suffering intense pain in a hospital bed as a consequence of terminal illness or surgery do not receive the grace of pain medicine that are readily available in rich countries. The international drug control regime has led to deprivation of pain medication on our continent, mostly because of the constant fear of diversion to the black market. As human beings able of compassion, we think that depriving people in pain of readily available medication is a disgrace and cruelty. Some argue that African countries lack the capacity to implement health-centered reforms that include harm reduction and treatment. However, evidence shows that these services are way more cost-effective than criminalization. 50 years of anti-drug propaganda, but all the war on drugs has achieved nothing but severely overcrowded prisons, boosted HIV transmission, extrajudicial killings, and horrific human and financial cost.
Research has found that 1.6% of the population of Africa is involved in some sort of drug abuse, a figure that is higher than North and South America and is only surpassed by Europe. Out of the nearly 10 million drug users in Africa, the number is expected to grow to up to 14 million by the year 2050, many of them being the young people that make up the large part of the African population. Even though West African countries, especially Nigeria, have the highest number of drug users currently, the East African region is expected to be the fastest growing region in drug abuse-related activities in the coming decades, with the population of active drug users in East Africa going up to 3 times, from just 2 million today to more than 5.5 million by 2050. I think it's an open secret that most of the drug trafficking happening in Africa is controlled by the elite, the big politicians, the big businessmen around the continent. They are the ones who are the real criminals in this story, and not the guy passed out on the street.
As you can see, the war on drugs is much about using force against people. By isolating people who use drugs and dragging them through the justice system, we have reinforced marginalization, isolation, and stigma that all fuel drug consumption and addiction. By focusing on repression and prohibition, we have strengthened criminal organizations that make billions every year by trafficking drugs and crushed the fate of many of our youths. There must be differentiation between drug trafficking barons who can get away through the eye of a needle and youth who get entangled in drug use, who invariably must be treated as health issues. Again, let us stop criminalizing addiction.
With many African countries having corrupt government institutions that are weak and unable to enact and safeguard their population from the surging amounts of drug inflow that is happening currently. The situation in Africa, especially for the young people, indeed looks bleak. But perhaps as a ray of hope, specialists in this area have suggested that Africa follow the way of Portugal. When I first heard what Portugal did, I was surprised that it actually has worked as well as it has. Listen to this. In July 2001, a law came into effect in Portugal that effectively decriminalized the use of all drugs in the country. Heroin, cocaine, any drug, you name it. It was all legal. And in fact, drug use in the country was now considered a simple misdemeanor that did not require any prison sentences, but in fact required hospitalization and medical care. Portugal, in effect, took the drug problem out of the hands of the police and the judicial system and instead put it upon the public health system, treating drug users as the sick people that they indeed are and not criminals. The story of portraying drug users as criminals, I think, is a result of many years of brainwashing that has happened to many of us, maybe through our school system or through the information that we have gotten from the government. But I think it's time that we outgrow this thought and maybe think of something bigger, a way to help the young people who are trapped in this problem. The uncontrolled use of syringes and needles has been shown over and over again to contribute to the immense spread of the HIV virus. When Portugal decriminalized drug use in the country, it actually encouraged pharmacies around the country to offer free needles and syringes to any drug users who willingly came seeking help from them. You would think these moves by Portugal would lead to an increase in drug use. But research that has now taken nearly 20 years has shown that drug use in Portugal is lower than all its surrounding European neighbors. And in fact, criminal activities that go along with the war of drugs have reduced dramatically over the years. In effect, because drugs are no longer illegal, there is no criminal incentive to do it in the shadows and in the dark alleys anymore. The quality of the drugs has also improved surprisingly. Drugs that have been spiked or not properly made or are dangerous and could lead to overdoses and poisonings have dramatically gone down. The statistics speak for themselves. The uptake of treatment to help addicts recover from drug addiction has increased in Portugal by over 60%. HIV infections related to drug use have gone down by over 90%. The number of people dying from overdoses and many kinds of drug poisoning has gone down from thousands to just around 20 in the year 2018. The massive burden on the judicial and the policing system in the country has also gone down dramatically because many people are no longer being taken to the police or to court when they are found with drugs. Instead, these people are going to the hospital where they can find help to recover from the problem that they have. I think the war on drugs around the world and even in Africa is now in a perpetual positive feedback loop where the more we fight it, the more difficult the problem becomes. The deeper into the criminal world the problem goes. And perhaps it is time for the policymakers around Africa to think outside the box, to think of a way that actually helps, not criminalizes, drug users in Africa. Indeed, drug traffickers are criminals, but we all know that many of the drug traffickers, especially the big guys, the big fish up there, the big politicians and the big businessmen, nobody is touching them. They are untouchable. All the blame and all the police and judicial action is taking place on the people who actually need medical help.
There is a little hope though. The South African judiciary has been led to accept decriminalization of cannabis for all personal use. Ghana decriminalized too through a bold and inspiring legislative bill. The Seychelles adopted law enforcement diversion. Opioid substitution treatments are now functional in Nigeria, Senegal, Kenya, Tanzania, Mauritius, and Morocco. Zimbabwe, Malawi, and Lesotho have also legalized cannabis for medical purposes. While these moves are underway, African politicians and communities are struggling to get out of the rigid thinking imposed by the international drug control system. Our countries have long stood by this international drug control regime. We enforced it because to comply with international obligations, we were told to fight organized crime. But along the way, we sometimes lost the focus on protecting our people and our children. And I think this is more important than anything else.
This is a plea to all of us. I am sure you know someone who is trapped and cannot get out of their drug use problem. This person is sick. This person needs medical help. This person does not need to be locked up in prison. A change of mindset will be better for Africa. Perhaps a change of mindset will be better on this so-called war on drugs, because clearly the drugs are winning. So if you know someone in this problem, go talk to them, go love them, go and encourage them to seek help, because help is there. They just need to be willing to seek help. Thank you so much for coming along. If you think there's anything that I left out, please let me know in the comments below. You can also reach me on my Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you like the work that we do here at The African Scientist, please consider subscribing and also liking this video. This goes a long way in making the almighty YouTube algorithm show our videos to more people. If you'd like to give even more support to The African Scientist, consider clicking these 2 links to buy us a coffee. We appreciate all the help we can get. All the cool people are listening to podcasts these days. And we also have a podcast, the African Scientist Podcast, the only place where African voices speak science. Go there and see what's new. You probably like it. This is the African Scientist, science from an African perspective. And I think YouTube thinks you might like this video. Click on it, maybe you like it.